Hey everyone, I just wanted to make a quick video on how to use the Stream Deck in vvvv. I think a lot of people have seen the Stream Deck. It's a little controller you can pop on your desk. There's all sorts of plugins and things you can do with it, but basically there are buttons with a little screen behind them. So really cool. If you want to use that in vvvv, there's a few approaches you can take. You can use the official Stream Deck software and set up something like keyboard shortcuts for your application and then listen to those keyboard shortcuts and so on. But I actually found a much simpler and nicer way of using this and using a relatively recent feature of vvvv called global channels, which is really nice. I'll show you in a sec. So yeah, Stream Deck, there's many different versions. There's big ones, small ones, and so on, and they're getting used more and more in sort of professional environments, which is really cool. And to use those, I wouldn't use the Stream Deck software itself, which is okay. It has a few plugins, but it's more for like streamer stuff for like Twitch and OBS and those kind of things. So for that, it's cool. But if you want to use it more in a professional environment, or if you just want to like use it for whatever, which is what vvvv is good for, connecting one thing to another thing, I found a much easier way. So there's this thing called the Bitfocus Companion. It's a open source software, and it just has a ton of integrations with professional hardware and software that you can control directly from it, and there's all sorts of plugins and so on you can use, and it's basically an alternative to the Stream Deck software itself. So you need that, so just download that, and once you've installed it, it will look like this. So it basically runs a local web server, and you can just launch the GUI. So let's just do that. So this is what it looks like. And you have this thing called connections. So these are sort of your plugins that you can use. What we want to use, because the global channels can use them, is Midi. So Midi is great for a lot of things. So we can just use this generic Midi plugin. I'll just add that. And it will ask me what Midi in and output I want to use. And since we just want to sort of use Midi to route between maybe different software on the computer, on the local computer, it's good to have a local Midi port. Now I have quite a lot of Midi ports because I have a few devices in here. But if you just want something that runs on the computer, I can recommend LoopBe. So this is just a virtual Midi driver. So it just gives you a Midi in and output port, and it just runs in the background. It's really small. I've had it running for like the last 10 years, and it's been super handy for routing Midi between things. And yeah, it's just a great little device, a little bit of software. It just runs here, and it just gives you a Midi port. So I'm actually going to use that. So oops, no, not that one. LoopBe and save. So now I have this generic Midi sort of plugin, you can say, set up. And exactly, now I can start setting up my buttons. I can actually, here I have a few surfaces. So I have an actual Stream Deck, which is here sitting on my desk, but you can also have an emulator, which is kind of cool. So you can set it up here, like how many rows and columns do you want? So I set it up the same as the as my actual Stream Deck. So I'm just gonna pop this out, and let's just have this here. We can hide this one. Let's just have this here as a sort of representation, so you can see what's happening on the actual Stream Deck. And now we can start to set up a button. So we'll just create a button. Let's just call this 1. And then when we press it, so we just want Midi, and let's just send a control change. Let's just say channel 1, controller 1. When we press it, we want the value to be 127. And let's also add a release. So when we release it, we want to just set the value back to 0. So basically, if I press it, I'm doing on the actual thing now, I can also do it here. Then the value switches between 127 and 1 or 0, however you look at it. In vvvv, it's 0 and 1, so they're floats. Okay, and then we also want some feedback. So feedback is like the other way, basically. So we want to also receive something. So we want to say receive MIDI message, and we say just CC, and we say that when it's under 127, we want the background to change to, let's use this light green color, and the text to black. You'll see what that looks like in a second. Okay, so that's our button. That's all we need to do. Now we can jump into vvvv, and you'll see that it takes about 3 nodes, I think, to use the Stream Deck in your software and actually do it in a way that is very sensible using global channels. Okay, so no, I don't want to open anything. I want to just create a new document. And so since we want to use global channels, which is something that is native to vvvv by now, but we want to use a Midi binding. So we have to get a node called the Midi controller something. And since I don't have the package installed yet, but it actually suggests it, let's get the IO Midi. So I just click on it and it will just install the dependency. And then I want the Midi controller module, this one here. Okay, so I place that down. You don't have to do anything. It just has to sit somewhere. Doesn't really, don't need to hook up anything to it. It just has to be there for it to work. And now let's just create a global channel, which is sort of a slightly fancier way of saying it's just a parameter. It's just a value that I can, it's like a global variable. It's a value that I can get somewhere and I can set it somewhere, and it can have binding, which you'll see in a sec. So let's just call this MIDI1. This is what it's called, and the global channel always needs to have its type set. So the easiest way to do that is just start a link from the value, middle click, and then we need it to be a float. So this only works for floats at the moment, which is fine though. So now I can either press Command F3, or I believe I can probably open it here somewhere, or I just have it docked here, is the global channel browser. And you'll see here the MIDI1 pops up straight away. And exactly, now I can I can just drag the value, and you will see that it changes here. And if I use a set value here, then I can do the same in reverse, but we actually just want to bind MIDI to it. And then the nice thing is that I don't really need to patch anything for that. I can just come up in here, I go to bindings, and I want to add a binding. And since I have this MIDI controller module, I will now see the MIDI controller is available. If you don't have this module in your patch, then nothing will show up here. So let's add that. And now I want to say basically the same as on the other end in the companion. I want to say my input and output is LoopBe, and I want to send and receive. And now I don't actually need to set these up manually. I can just hit learn, and now I can just press this, and you'll see that it's set up MIDI channel 0. Well, it's really MIDI channel 1, but it shows as 0, and controller number 1. So let's just press OK. And now we get a warning. Okay, but what you see here is that if I press this button, then you can see my value going up and down. It's going down to 0.08 for some reason. Probably because we set it to 1 and not to 0. So we can actually go back in here and say we want the value to be 0. Let's see if that does it. I'll put this on my other screen and oh, nope. Where is it? There is it. There it is. Yeah, there we go. Now you can see it toggles between 0 and 1, and I can do the same on my actual Stream Deck here. 0 and 1. And the other thing is, if I set this to 1, you will see that it lights up green. So if there is something in my patch that that sets this value to 1, then this will light up basically. And I can set it back to 0, and it sort of syncs the state. And yeah, that is pretty much all you have. So this is like it's 2 nodes and a couple of I/O boxes. And with that, you have a setup that is really simple. I can go in here. I can actually just copy this button a few times. So I just do that. Copy, click. And now let's really quickly just make these 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll just go in here and say, so this needs to be controller 2, and on the feedback it also needs to be controller 2. And then here it's controller 3 and 3 and 3. And let's do the last one, 4 and 4. And here also 4. Okay, and now I can just here press Command D. If I hold Shift, then I can, it's always 2 up, then it's on the same height, and then I just shift it over, and now if I press D twice, then it'll use the same spacing, which is kind of neat if you have a bit of OCD. Oops, let's call it MIDI 3 and MIDI 4, and now let's just, the last thing, add a binding, send and receive. Oops, LoopBe, and let's just learn. Okay. Bindings, add binding, click, send and receive. LoopBe, learn, number 3. And the last one, send and receive, LoopBe, and let's learn that one, number 4. Okay, so now as you can see, if I'm actually pressing the buttons on my actual Stream Deck, or I can do the same here, and you will see that the values are changing. And so yeah, that is a super easy way, quick way to get a Stream Deck into your patch. Global channels actually have a lot of other advantages to using them in your patch. So if you're building something, it's probably a good idea to use them anyways. And the MIDI controller binding is just super easy to do. I also like that it's in this GUI. You can here save presets. You can do all this cool stuff that you normally would have to patch. And I think that's a really good way of doing it. And the Bitfocus Companion is actually, so if you want to use this in a professional setup, then if you want to use the Stream Deck in a professional setup, which kind of makes sense because they're cheap and actually really good, then the Bitfocus Companion will allow you to do that. And you can do things like share it over the network and set up multiple Stream Decks with the same setup really easily remotely, and I don't know, do all this really cool stuff. So I think it's the way to go. It's much easier than when I've tried doing it with the Stream Deck software, and you have to do all these weird like workarounds with shortcuts, and then you have to look out that the shortcut doesn't trigger anything else, and yeah, it gets really messy really quickly. But with this companion and with the MIDI and the MIDI binding via LoopBe, I think this is just sort of probably the easiest way to use a Stream Deck in vvvv. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. Have fun.